Well, hello there and good evening. And of course, we want to welcome you down here to our studios at NCN for yet another program, and this is the Parliamentary Agenda. And this evening, it is my honor to have with me, to my right, Minister of Legal Affairs and Attorney General Mohabir Anil Nandlall, and he's here to sit with us for the next hour. And to my left as well, we've got a dear Minister, Gail Teixeira, Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to welcome you both.
Thank you very much.
By now, you would recognize that the parliamentary agenda speaks to exactly that. And so we are meeting one evening or day before the next sitting, which will be tomorrow, of course, as a number of bills will be read for the second time. Some of those bills we will speak of, and I will go through them just before we get into our conversation. And we also want to spend some time in our conversation talking about the President's address. This is his first, and it is a historic event. So there is much conversation that will come from that. But let's get to the bills that will be appearing. And of course, I did say it's going to be the second reading. The first will be the Law Reform Commission Amendment Bill. That is one of the bills. The second one is the Adoption of Children Amendment Bill. There is also the Deceased Persons Estate Administration Amendment Bill. We've got as well the Small Business Amendment Bill of 2020. The fifth is a Hire Purchase Bill. And of course, this is to the select committee, so I'm not going to read it, but it's the Narcotics, Drugs, and Psychotropic Substance Control Amendment Bill. So there are the bills before you that we're going to speak of. We want to start the conversation with Attorney General Anil Nandlall, and he will first, I think, want to start with the Law Reform Commission Amendment Bill.
Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. One thing we must recognize about every one of these bills, there's a common thread running through all of them. They are all directed to have a positive impact on our people in particular and the legal system generally. And that's the first point I want to make. The 90% of them are directed specifically to the poorer classes or working people who occupy priority attention in our developmental agenda. So we start with the Law Reform Commission Bill. We have had a Law Reform Commission established since 2016, 2017 by the last administration. And when the principal act, this one is an amendment, was passed in the National Assembly, we supported the concept of a Law Reform Commission. What we disagreed with were two components of the law. One, the appointment mechanism, and secondly, the composition of the commission once the law is passed. We feel that a Law Reform Commission is an important institution to drive law reform. And there are law reform commissions throughout the Commonwealth. In fact, we are late in the establishment of ours. But what the previous government did was to resign the power of appointment to the commission exclusively in the President, acting upon the advice of his Minister of Legal Affairs, without any consultation whatsoever with any organization or segment of the society. Now, that is a most flawed approach to a Law Reform Commission. A Law Reform Commission is a very important social legal institution. It must reflect by its composition and by the appointment process the views of the society. The laws are passed to govern a society. There's nothing political about that. Why would a president and a minister want to hog that power of appointment and would not want to engage in any form of consultation whatsoever with wider society, stakeholders, whose interests are going to be affected by the work of this commission. So that's the first change that we have made. We have made it mandatory for the president and the minister who is making the appointments to consult with every important stakeholder organization in our country. So we have singled out consultations with private sector commission, the religious organizations, the labor movement, rights organizations, organizations representing the legal profession, of course the judiciary, and even organization representing our indigenous people.
This is a wider cross-section.
Very wide cross-section. The social scientists, etc. Then the second important aspect of the amendment has to do with expanding the complement of persons who will sit on the commission.
Okay.
What the previous administration did was to confine persons only of legal training and qualifications to the commission. That's a very myopic view of what a law reform commission should be. So what they had, only former judges, attorneys at law of X number of years standing, and thirdly, persons who have taught law at university level. So they're all legally trained people. We have expanded that, and we have included social, in addition to the former judges and the lawyers and the professors of law, we have added social scientists, natural scientists, persons who have experience and training in industry, banking and commerce, and importantly, persons who have had training in administration of law, enforcement of the law. For example, the police force and persons qualified in that discipline. So when this commission sits, it's going to be a commission that would have been appointed via a consultative process with the widest cross-section of our society, and would be comprised of persons who are trained in every conceivable discipline. So for example, if suicide is a problem and requires law reform, then you have a social scientist there who can go out and carry out the type of investigations that will produce a report that can advise a government on how to proceed on this topic. And that applies to every conceivable area that are going to be governed by our law. Right. So that in essence is what the Law Reform Commission Amendment Bill seeks to do.
Okay. Now, with the importance of this particular bill, when is it expected that we will probably finish the legwork to actually start seeing some changes?
Well, permit me to go back again to the previous administration. Though they passed this bill in 2017, and perhaps it has now become fortunate, they did not appoint anyone. Yet they had rented a building for 3 whole years and staffed the building with clerical and secretarial staff, a brand new vehicle, a driver, but no commissioners. And I have totaled the expenditures that they caused taxpayers, over $100 million in the pursuit of this commission, and it has not produced anything. Well, it didn't have a commissioner, so it can't produce any law reform. So that's the wanton waste that has taken place. Then your question is when it is going to be up and running. I have already prepared the terms of reference for the staff. We already have a staff chart as to who will constitute the organization below the commissioner, the commissioners, or the commission itself. So you have a CEO, you have accounting staff, you have researchers, everything is there. I have already also secured a building, kind compliments of my colleague, the Minister of Culture, where the commission will be housed.
Okay.
Without causing taxpayers a single cent in rent. Right away we are saving taxpayers $800,000 per month rental for this commission, which was being paid by APNU AFC. So as soon as this bill is assented to by His Excellency the President, which I anticipate will take place within a week from its passage in the National Assembly, this commission, in about 2 weeks after, well, we have to engage in the consultation.
Correct.
So within the shortest possible time, because we can't shortchange the consultative process, having inserted it in the law. So once we are able to comply with the new legal procedure, then I don't anticipate any great difficulty. We'll certainly have this up and running within two months, 3 months maximum.
Oh, excellent. If I can bring in Governance Minister here on this, it is so important that the process is completed, and that the people benefit from it at soonest possible time.
Yes, of course, and I think that the point of consultation to get the members is also important. And my experience in the Committee of Appointment with bringing nominations through the Rights Commissions and Service Commissions is this is not usually a short process to get the various consultations going, to get the nominees and so forth. And so I think in the process, it's what also part of inclusive governance, that people have a stake in democracy. I mean, many people say the government should do this, government should do that, but when now you devolve some of the power and say, okay, you consult among yourselves and give names to the government, then people realize that this is not such an easy thing after all, and it bears a lot of responsibility. So I look forward to the process and how that will work. And I think it will be important. Funnily enough, tonight, Anil, we were looking at a number of pieces of legislation that need to be, they're outdated now.
Yes.
And so, for example, the suicide one and stuff like that.
Yes.
These are not major overhauls, they're not major rewrites and things like that, but some are sometimes just small amendments that could make a radical difference in a sector of the society or a large percentage of the people. So I think it will be an interesting process once that commission is properly set up as it should have been. And Anil kept raising in the last Parliament over and over again ad nauseum, why wasn't the commission being set up?
Yeah.
So now he's the one who will carry the mantle to set it up.
Yeah, well, that is
one last point I want to make here. This bill presents an outstanding example of our government's approach to governance. Sometimes we are accused of trying to control things. And here it is. We could have kept that act. It would have given us, the executive, all the control. It would have not obliged us to consult. And this is sometimes we are accused of. And here it is, an outstanding example of the executive government of the PPP civic administration voluntarily migrating power from itself to other organs of state and other organs in the society, and engaging in a consultative process. We could have easily kept the APNU bill. But we do law reform, we do law making with sense.
Correct.
And in a democratic, consultative way.
Correct. And before we go to the next bill, based on some of the information that I gathered by trying to pull it up, the last law commission exercise was done in 1978.
No, that's a law revision.
Revision.
Yes.
Yeah, it's revision.
No, we did another law revision.
And that was after.
That was completed in 2012.
And there was one before 1998 as well, yeah.
Yeah, there was one that was, but it did not result in the
2012 is the last.
consolidation of the laws.
Yeah.
But we completed one that ended in 2012, and
Right.
that is how you see the purple volume of the laws of Guyana. The one that you're referring to is the green volumes of the laws of Guyana.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the second bill, which is the Adoption of Children Amendment Bill. I think that is one that you'll be working on as well.
Well, this is one that we are hoping to have debated as well. And this has to do with our discharging our obligations as a sovereign state on the treaties that we have signed. Well, we didn't sign the treaty, the previous administration did. In 2019, signed on to the Geneva Convention in relation to children. And the conditionalities of that convention mandates the promulgation of some amendments to our current adoption laws that cater for country to what they are referring to as country to country
International
adoption.
adoptions, right?
And so that is what we are doing here, just to bring our adoption laws into international regulatory framework. But of course, as Mr. Shearer will tell you, we went at great lengths to ensure that our children remain protected, that we continue to have the type of oversight that our principal law dealing with adoption of children intended to have, the mechanisms that that act created, the protective safeguards that it erected, continue to apply to these amendments. So it's not that we took what was being offered as part of the treaty and incorporated in our domestic law in a wholesale manner. We subjected it to careful scrutiny, and we cut from it those parts that we felt would have weakened our protective mechanisms in relation to our children. And we put forward what we think would be a set of rules complying with our obligations, but putting in the law certain provisions that we feel augurs well for the best interest of our children, because that is our constitutional responsibility as an executive government.
Right. And to her credit, Minister Prasad in October 2020 installed the adoption board, and this is all in train to propel this process.
Yeah, well, the adoption board is a board that is established under our existing law, the Adoption of Children Act. And this bill seeks to amend that. So this process that this bill will undertake or will unfold will be subject to the governing supervisory authority of that board, specifically and generally the Child Care Protection Agency.
Which gives them more teeth.
Yeah, and also it allows for the adoption of children outside of Guyana. Because of the Hague Convention being signed in 2019, we were thought not to be in compliance then to have the infrastructure. And so the act the bill, as Minister says, names the authority that would deal with country-to-country adoptions from Guyana, being the Child Care Protection Agency.
Correct.
And also one of the concerns when we looked at the amendment was to make sure there wasn't undue imbalance in terms of foreign adoptions over local adoptions, that in some countries it goes the other way, that it's more attractive to adopt children from outside, but we recognize there's a large diaspora of people who would like to adopt children in Guyana, and therefore to balance that, but not to create undue preference to persons adopting our children from outside of Guyana.
Because there is the story which Guyana doesn't have as bad, which speaks to trafficking and abuse of children.
Yeah, but
that
this tries
happens
to
a lot.
protect by this
Exactly.
act, and the Hague Convention is
Correct.
to try to put mechanisms in place to prevent,
Protect that.
to protect that. Yeah.
Protect that. Okay, all right. So as we moved on, we've just touched on two bills. I think we're moving along nicely with the time, because we've got the bottom half of the program. We want to talk about the address by His Excellency tomorrow before Parliament. All right. So let's move on to the hire purchase bill. This one really about this is one that last when we met, it would have been Minister of Tourism H. Waldron, and she was very, very passionate about this bill. The fact that this is really going to go down to the small man that has been suffering as a result of the practice that has been happening for far too long. Minister Anil.
Well, what we have in Guyana now, applying as the law in relation to hire purchase, is the common law of England, which is over 1,000 years old, or perhaps more. So, hire purchase in Guyana exists in its rawest form. All over the world, countries have modified the hardships that the common law of hire purchase presents. And you have hire purchase acts that have specifically changed the common law. So a hire purchase transaction is essentially where you don't have money to buy a chattel, so you want to go and get it on credit. You enter into this arrangement that you call a hire purchase, which you think as a layman is a sale, but it is not a sale. It is a hiring with an option to purchase at the end of the hire, provided, of course, you comply with the conditions of that document that you are signing, which is called a hire purchase.
All the conditions.
All the conditions. Among those conditions are, for example, a condition that says that if you omit or fail or default in the payment of your last installment, then you lose that option to buy, because you get an option to purchase only after you pay your final installment. So the good that you purchased, let us say, is $100,000. And if you pay $95,000 out of that 100, but you fall sick, or your mother becomes ill, or one of your children encounters an emergency, and for whatever reason you cannot pay that $5,000 to complete that sale, the owner of the goods, because you're not the owner, you're only hiring, the owner of that chattel reserves the right not only to repossess that chattel, but to forfeit all the monies that you have paid. Now that is a draconian mechanism, and it remains in Guyana in its rawest form as part of our laws. This bill abolishes that and puts a mark beyond which, after payments are made to a certain percentage of the purchase price, the owner loses the right to repossess. He has to go to court, he has to comply with a number of provisions. And it also accords to both sides. It's not a one-sided bill. We were careful in balancing, because you also have the situation where the auto dealer who sells on credit, he gives you a good car just off the wharf, you take the man car, you go on and carry it to Camarang, you drive up and down, you broke up the crankshaft, you damage all the tires, you mess up the spring, you damage the engine, and then you don't pay the installment. So the man gets back a wreck when he goes to repossess. And you, therefore, would have won in the end. This bill strikes a balance of these competing interests so that the owner feels comfortable and the buyer feels comfortable, the hirer. In addition to that, we are still, and again I emphasize, because of our style of governance, which Mr. Teixeira will expand upon, because we believe in a democratic, consultative type of government, we are taking this bill to a select committee, where we will sit with the opposition and go through it clause by clause, but most importantly, because they don't offer much constructive input in anything in the parliament, and you would have seen that very evidently over the past few weeks. We are inviting the important stakeholders, the consumer protection organizations, the auto dealers, courts, Guyana Inc., singers, people who are affected by this, by transactions of a high purchase nature, to come in to us and further help us fashion a bill or a law that they will find mutually acceptable, both owner as well as consumer. And that is why we are referring this bill to a select committee, as we did to the marijuana bill. Again, exemplifying the style of governance, consultative, democratic, that we are speaking about.
No, I think that this bill, I think, Guyanese have been waiting for a long time for it, and we've been talking about it for a long time. And the Select Committee is the best avenue. It's ironic that in the last administration, we recommended several bills to go to Select Committee because they were problematical or controversial or needed more discussion, and they refused each time. And the one bill they sent to Select Committee was a consultative one on Constitutional Reform Commission, which committee was sent to the Constitutional Reform Committee, which never met. And so this bill, I think, is an important one that can benefit Guyanese. People can feel there's some security and they wouldn't be ripped off, but also, as Anil said, the person who is hiring out the item also is protected. It does require assurances, and I think the importance in the Select Committee would have hearings where organizations will be invited to make their presentations, make their recommendations. As I said with democracy, sometimes things take a little longer, but you come out with a better product and you get a better buy-in. And so this level of inclusivity is important. And I think if as soon as the budget's over, the Select Committee would start working, and hopefully by August, when we're going to recess, we would have a finished product. Hopefully, you never know in terms of the level of contributions, but I think we could do it before the end of, before we go into recess.
Okay. What is the feeling that a man in the street should have at the process and to the point where you are with this bill, and the expectation that at the end of the process, they stand to benefit more than they are benefiting right now?
This bill will have an overwhelmingly significant impact on the lives of working people, our young people, our older people. Every class will benefit from this bill. I mean, you know of the number of, look at your employees here. You just carry out a survey and ask them how many of them are currently driving cars that they have purchased on hire purchase. And you will see, you'll come back with a data of about 90%. 90% just in this small organization. That is replicated countrywide. I had the privilege when I was in private practice of working for many of the auto dealers, and I mean, they flourish. That means that it's profitable. It means that the business is big and is good. So, and you know, agricultural equipment, farmers, right? And then you have our loggers. They buy a lot of the skidder and chainsaw from Farfan and Mendes and Courts. And then you have the our seamstresses. They buy the machines from Singers. Average family buy the fridge and the... So
the percentage is extremely high. It's high.
Across the country.
It's very high.
This will benefit people. And it protects both sides. And that is why it is going to be one of the most transformational pieces of legislation that we are going to pass in this parliament. Okay. This bill has been in the pipeline. In fact, this is the president's bill, actually.
Okay.
When he was a minister, he and I worked on this bill. He was the Minister of Trade. And we were working together on this bill. And as Gail correctly said, it spent a number of years in the pipeline with consultants in our efforts to get the most modern bill in the region. It is going to be the most modern bill in the region because we sought Canada, England, and the entire Caribbean. And then we went into that parliament where we had a minority government, and we didn't want to make it the subject of a political football, as everything in that parliament was reduced to. So now we get an opportunity to bring it. But you know, it was at the AG chambers all the time.
It was there all the time.
It was there all the time. They could have passed it. In fact, I told the then Attorney General, why don't you bring this bill? It will benefit the country and you will get some kind of kudos. He never bothered with me.
All right, so the final bill we want to touch on.
There are two more. One is, I think, that I think Anil would really be good at explaining is the deceased.
This is where we're going to next.
Because that is a small bill.
Yeah.
But it has a huge impact on people in our country.
When I read it, I really wanted to learn from, Minister Nandlall. How does this really go down? And you were right, Minister Teixeira. How does a man in the street, the common Joes, really benefit from this particular bill?
This bill is designed specifically for the common Joe, as you call it. Now, when a person dies, that person's assets are frozen in law. No one can touch it. If it is a car, perhaps you can drive it, but you can't renew the insurance.
Yeah.
You can't transfer the registration. You can't sell it. You can't. If it is money in the bank, you can't withdraw it. If it is a property, you can't mortgage it. You can't sell it. You can't touch it.
That's stuff.
Lawfully deal with it in any way. So you have to get what is called a letters of administration if the person dies without leaving a will. And if the person leaves a will, you have to get what is called a probate. You have to probate that will. Either of these two processes require you to approach the High Court and make an application to a judge to get either the grant of the letters of administration or the grant of probate, and it is either of those two instruments that authorizes the person to whom it is granted to stand in the shoes of the deceased and then deal with the assets as if in the manner that the deceased could have dealt with it, subject of course to the rights of the beneficiaries. That process that I'm referring to costs based upon the value of the estate. The higher the estate, the lawyer charges you a percentage of it. But at a minimum, it costs $200,000 to $300,000, and it takes about currently now, I was dealing with one today, where it was filed in 2018, and it is still pending. This is 2021, 3 years. A child who is entitled to money that the father has in the bank account, but the father is deceased, and I don't want to call the name, can't go to university because they can't access that money unless they get that paper from the court. And 3 years passes, and that paper is not granted. This bill allows you, and sometimes importantly, people don't even have money to do the funeral. But the deceased has money at GBTI or at Citizen Bank that can easily do the funeral. But the family can't access it without these letters of administration or without this paper from the court, as they would say. This bill authorizes the spouse of the deceased or the closest next of kin, if there is no spouse, to go to a bank, produce the death certificate and the relationship of kinship. Let us say if it's a wife, a marriage certificate. If it's a father, the birth certificate that has the name of the father, and the father's ID card and your ID card, and the bank will allow you to draw out up to $750,000 out of the deceased account without the letters of administration. So that's the first significant impact that this bill has. The second significant impact is that for estates whose total value is $750,000, we abolish the need to get letters of administration. You can deal with it just like that. You have the authority to deal with it just like that. So the man dies and he has a car. If you get a valuation that car values $600,000, you can sell that car the next day without getting letters of administration. Now imagine the type of things that can be done and how many thousands of people are going to be positively affected by this simple measure. And this is again, remember I began by saying that each of these bills have a human face to them.
Positive impact.
They are all designed to have a significant impact on the lives of our people, and in particular our more vulnerable, our poorer classes, the working people of our country. And that is the agenda of our government, the priority agenda of our government.
So when amended, this is exactly what is going to happen.
That is what is going to happen. Let me take one point before Gail comes in. I made a call to the Banking Association. The Banking Association. Perhaps the commercial banks are, I suppose, the richest entities in this country. And they told me that annually they are left with millions and millions of dollars in their accounts. Why? Because the cost, because the man dies, he has no property, real property, movable property, house or land or anything. But he got $300,000 in the bank. The cost to get the $300,000 is about the same value, $300,000. That is what the lawyer will charge. So the $300,000 is left in the bank. It's left in the bank. So you understand how much money the bank is left with? Poor people money. Money that really the man would have really needed to have a proper funeral or to have a proper wake. But he couldn't. That is the type of impact that this bill has.
Okay. Minister Teixeira?
I mean, anything that could make life easier for people, the level of bureaucracy sometimes, the difficulties of getting through the courts. I think this bill is long overdue in the sense that it has been a problem because many of our men die with no will in the first place.
Because you don't prepare for that in many instances.
Well, I'm not sure if we don't prepare, that we don't like to prepare. I'm not sure. But sometimes. But the issue is that there are so many families that are left in this very difficult situation that Anil has described. And I think whatever we could do in a legal way to make it easier, that would be the best thing. When you talk about spouse, so I hope that also we recognize civil unions. And so the way in which they are able to access. So when you said spouse, I think a lot of people out there saying, well, what about me who is I'm not married, but I'm living with a man for some years.
5 years.
And so that issue is important too, for them to face assurances, because we amended the act with the civil union to do with inheritances of persons who are in civil unions. So it's important that we recognize that a lot of women will benefit from this, and children. Anything that we could do, and these are not major pieces of legislation, but they're ways in which it can make life easier, simpler, and in many cases less costly for people. I'm encountering so many times people running here and there over and over again to get these things resolved. As Anil has described with the court, 3 years is ridiculous for a matter like this to be resolved. And as he correctly pointed out, the banks always keep pointing out how many dormant accounts they have at the end of the year or after 2 years, all this accumulation of cash that has not been accessed and belong to people, but they don't have the wherewithal, the proof, the evidence or whatever is required to be able to access it. So I think that this will be an important, an important step for the government and for people in this country.
Talking about the civil unions, this is important because for someone, and Minister Teixeira talked about it, somebody who is living with a man for a long time, let's say more than 10 years, he died but they never got rid of it. This is an issue for her,
well,
for him.
We have corrected that already.
Yes, in law.
In 2014, we passed an act that recognized the rights of, rather, that conferred the rights of a common law wife when the husband dies. Our law prior to that recognized them while they were alive.
Yeah.
So if you live with a common law husband living in a common law union with a single woman, a single man with a single woman in a common law union, during their lifetime they separate, the rights that a legal wife has applies to this.
Be transferred to her.
Right?
Yes.
After 5 years. But there was a lacuna. That right never extended to when the man dies, and only the legal wife benefited. So you had an anomaly in the law. And in 2014, we corrected it by conferring upon a common law wife of a deceased the same rights and powers that a married woman would have had. So the problem that Gail referred to is no longer a problem, because we cured that problem in 2015.
That was taken care of then.
Right.
Right. So we want to shift our focus a little bit to what is going to be happening tomorrow with Dr. Muhammad Irfan Ali addressing Parliament. But before we do that, I think you wanted to make mention of some developments at the PAC.
Well, I think just in terms of as a parliamentary program, the Public Accounts Committee, I think people have known, we brought a motion. The meeting was aborted and by the action of the chairman, Mr. Patterson, he forced the abortion of the meeting so that we could not vote. And so this Monday we were supposed to meet where we intended to again do what we did before, which was to put the motion to a vote, in which the clerk of the National Assembly had guided him in front of the whole committee that the motion was in order, it should go to a vote if it can't be solved consensually. And no meeting was convened. So in other words, it's again the typical behavior of PNC, APNU, AFC. They can't get their way, so they throw down their bat and ball and leave. So that we'll have to see what will take place in terms of their position is that we should withdraw our motion. We're saying we're not. Because in a sense, Mr. Patterson, by his behavior and by what has been exposed with him, should, I think, do the honorable thing. We're not asking him to come out of the committee, we're saying come out of the chairmanship. And therefore, he should do the honorable thing and step down. He's a big man, as we say in Guyana, that you can take a lot, and let someone else chair from the opposition. We're not saying to take over the PAC. Their attitude has been, if it's not Patterson, it's nobody, and the committee won't meet. So we're in that kind of situation now, and we'll see. We had hoped that the meeting would have been called on Monday, but maybe it's not surprising that they didn't call a meeting. And then we have the Committee of Appointment, which is meeting, and where we have just concluded the nominee to the Judicial Service Commission, and as you know, the Judicial Service Commission hasn't been meeting since 2017. So we're hoping that we can pass that in Parliament as soon as possible, because that's one of the constitutional bodies that requires parliamentary support, and that we'll be able to have that very important commission, constitutional body set up. We've also just finished a nominee from the Local Government Commission, for the Local Government Commission, and we're starting now the work on the rights commissions. A number of them expired several years ago, since 2013.
Okay.
This is this is Rights to the Child, Indigenous and Women and Gender. And ethnic relations will expire in April, and the other service commissions will expire in August. So we have a lot of work to do, again with consultation. We have to include other organizations and to be able to have their nominations. So it's important for people asking, well, what's happening with the commissions, what's happening with the constitutional bodies? Work has started at the parliamentary level on that. Again, today was also interesting in that the opposition didn't turn up to the meeting. And that was also interesting. Why didn't they? One person gave an excuse, the others didn't and never turned up. So unless all of them forgot, these are when we look at their patterns of behavior and what that would mean. And then you have, Anil has convened the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Constitutional Reform, which hasn't met for a number of years. Mr. Granger was the chair of it in the 10th Parliament, and Mr. Basil Williams was the chair of it in the 11th Parliament. And Anil, I think they were in those total of 2 parliaments. There may have been 2 meetings or 3.
About that.
Yeah.
About that. You know what is the most amazing thing, and what never these people, they continue to astonish me by their counterproductive action. The committee system of the Parliament is an oversight mechanism over the executive. We are the executive. We should not be fighting for that committee to function to oversight us. The Public Accounts Committee is the most powerful institution under the Constitution to exact from the executive accountability in relation to public expenditures. They should be, from day one, ensure that that committee begins its work and be up and running on every occasion. They are shooting themselves in the foot by quibbling on who's to be chairman. You are going to be the chairman. It's your committee.
Because it belongs to the
Get
opposition.
it and put pressure on the government. I've never seen a bunch of more incompetent people in this in my entire life. But that's a matter for them.
But you see, remember that they have to look at 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019
I know,
audit
but-
before they reach 2020 and 2021. And so my own view is that to follow on what Anil is saying, is my own view is that part of this charade that's going on with Mr. Patterson and the other three members is that they really don't want to deal with 2016 to 2019 audit reports, because the Auditor General, the Auditor General has been very detailed and expansive in what he has uncovered over those years in all the sectors. I mean, you have ministries with 47 paragraphs, 50-something paragraphs that you have to examine of what went wrong or what breaches took place. We've never had that level of volume, say, from the Auditor General's office. And my submission is that, because if you take Anil's line of what he's saying about why would you not use this opportunity, the problem is that they want that opportunity, but they don't want it now, or they want to find a way to skip 2016 to 2019.
They can't. So
And they can't.
the easier get it out of the way. Is that better for you?
All right, so as we wind down to programming time, we want to put the icing on the cake. Tomorrow's address by the head of state, his maiden address, first for a young president. Of course, he has functioned in government, doing a number of responsibilities. I remember him well in housing. But this is, I'm sure, a very proud moment for Dr. Mohabir. We begin with you, Minister.
Certainly, it would be a very historic moment for our president and us in our party and in government. As you correctly said, it is the first time that he will be addressing the National Assembly as president, and it will be the first address by a president for this parliament. I don't know whether he would want to continue to address as Mr. Granger did, but the tradition has always been, only on the rarest of occasions, having addressed the parliament once, only on a very, very rare and exceptional occasion would a president go back and address the parliament. Mr. Granger used to visit us with, commendable regularity when he was president. But I suppose that the president will outline his vision for the next 5 years of his presidency, next 4 to 5 years of his presidency, which would include the governmental agenda, our international positions, as well as, I think, he will want to speak a little on our parliamentary agenda.
Okay.
But, it's the president's domain. So
His domain, his forte. Madam Teixeira.
No, I'm very glad it's taking place, because, as Anil said, it's important that the vision that our president has and our government has comes directly from the top, so that the entire parliament knows. Because when we speak in parliament, sometimes the opposition has no regard for what we say anyway. But the issue is here's the president of the nation. He represents the nation, not PBP Civic alone, but all the people, as he keeps repeating. And I believe that his line will be very similar to what he's saying and has been saying all along, but also the additionality of where is the vision of Guyana, and how can every person in every part of Guyana share that vision. And the issue of the whole philosophy that the PEP has on inclusive governance, which is not just, as some people have seen it, as opposition government speaking. If the opposition says we're illegitimate, well, we still have a responsibility to create avenues for people to engage with us. And so the whole concept that we have carried of inclusive governance has to do with the responsibility and the involvement of people from the bottom up, and that is in the grassroots, in the communities, in the Amerindian village councils, the neighbor democratic councils, city councils, regions, up to the top in civil society. And that whole concept of really making Article 13, in a sense, real, and one in which we build our own model of inclusive governance. I think these are some of the issues the President has referred to, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't refer to again tomorrow. And of course, following shortly after his presentation and his speech to the Parliament, which is ceremonial, but it's an important ceremony that must be kept and is being kept. And the following day, of course, is Dr. Ashley Singh, the Minister of Finance, with
Presentation,
the 2021 budget. And so the linkage of the visions and the way in which we implement that in 2021. 2021 is a critical year for us in terms of getting a number of these major transformative projects up and running, so that they can be finished in 2 years' time or 3 years' time or 1 year's time. And therefore, this year we're going at a speed to make sure that we're able to bring the investments and the transformation issues, so people can begin to see in reality things being done, things happening, so they feel more confident of the future.
Yeah. Well, we're just about to wrap up, but of course I want to end by saying that the questions may be asked of why a few months after only now he's addressing Parliament. Well, it's primarily because of what he's been doing, making sure he laid the groundwork, get involved in the economy, which has been struggling, issues with COVID, trying to fix that, make sure that is working, at least systems up and running for the people to benefit.
Yeah.
I know that there are vaccines, I saw an announcement, that are on the way, or are here already.
Yes.
Right? And so this is a part of his agenda. It's really an aggressive agenda, a
Very.
transformative revolution, as you would want it to deem. So
I mean, some people want to be sticklers and say, well, it should have taken
Yes.
place in...
Yeah, I mean,
we're
those
not
questions will be
sticklers.
asked.
PPP is not good at stickling to...
Questions
we're
will always be
always
asked.
different.
Questions will always be
We
asked.
concentrate on substance and not form.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, that
Thank
the
you.
people benefit. The people benefit.
That is the
And
substance.
that the country moves forward. I want to thank you both for coming. It really was my pleasure having you, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Anil Nandlall, and Parliamentary Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, and of course, Governance, Madam Gail Teixeira.
Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you very
And
much.
on to our next program, but looking forward to tomorrow's address to the President, and on Friday would be Budget Day. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. Do take care, and good evening.
Thank you very much.